Yeah, so I don't know, maybe Rick, do you want to just start and kind of introduce yourself? Like some people have heard your episode, but maybe just kind of like 2-minute spiel on like your background and the problem that you're versed in, and we can take it from there.
Sure. I live in Scottsdale, Arizona. My name is Rick Shapiro. And my journey through this cancer world, in fact, in a former lifetime, don't hold it against me. The key words here are former lifetime. I used to practice law, but not anymore. But my journey that is applicable to today's meeting concerns a book I wrote called Hope Never Dies, and it concerns the cancer world. I am not a medical doctor, and the journey began when my father was afflicted with a very serious cancer back in 1996. And to be brief, because I could talk about this for 4 hours, that would be the short version. But my father died of cancer. He went through chemotherapy, which was very devastating to his health. I started wondering if there was a better way. I was told back in 2001, 21 years ago, that I should get a biopsy of my liver because my liver enzymes were high. But I decided to make transformational changes to my nutritional and dietary habits in terms of what I would eat and what I did not eat. And after doing that for 30 days, the doctor said no need for a biopsy because my liver enzymes were through the stratosphere. They were through the roof. And they were very, very concerned after doing CAT scans and ultrasounds and taking lots of blood out of me to try and assess what the problem was. But the next step was, gee, maybe he has liver cancer. Well, that was 21 years ago. I don't think so. But I started wondering if nutritional transformational changes could alter the disease process. So anyway, long story short, I've been to 30 cancer conferences. I've spoken at over 60 podcasts and radio shows. I've spoken at cancer conferences around the country regarding lessons learned from Hope Never Dies, where in brief, I'll just say, I'll sum it up in a minute. I interviewed 20 people who were all told by major cancer centers in the United States to get your affairs in order. These people were told they had 3 months, 6 months, and maybe a year to go. All kinds of cancer, glioblastoma, which is brain cancer, pancreatic, breast cancer, prostate cancer, lung cancer, ovarian cancer. They were all told by major centers, you've got a very short time frame. You have an expiration date. Lo and behold, they're all here. They're all surviving. I've met at least 500 people who were told to get their affairs in order, but they also implemented other things beyond standard of care. Standard of care in brief is chemo, radiation, and surgery, and they brought other therapeutic tools to the table. And here they are thriving and confounding the experts and living life. So in brief, I wrote a book. I interviewed 20 people. It's their stories. I interviewed 5 top docs who I think are the cutting edge, complementary, and integrative docs in the United States. Those are the people I would call. And I also wrote a section of the book called 83 Critical Questions You Must Ask Your Cancer Doctor Before Hiring Him or Her. Now, I know no one's going to ask 83 questions, but it's a guide. So the inspirational part, 20 stories, real people, real names, 5 docs, and what they do to save lives, and 83 questions to ask. So I believe that we need to rethink how we approach cancer. And I think there are lots of things we can do to save lives and extend lives and enhance quality of life that we're not doing now for the most part.
Yep. Okay, cool. And we can I think we'll probably do intros and then circle back on questions afterwards. And I know since Kimber, hey, thanks for joining. Kimber Lanning was episode number 1, the very first guest on the show. Kimber, I know you have like a hard stop, so maybe we'll let you go next and then stick around for as much of the Q&A as you're able to attend for.
Sure. And Sean, just to clarify, we're just doing a brief high-level intro or what?
Yeah, just like, most people have heard the podcast episodes, but for the people who haven't, maybe just kind of a quick intro of who you are, the problem that you're attacking. In your case, it's like a lot of problems, but, just kind of a quick summary, like 3 minutes.
Sure. Great. So nice to see you all. I'm Kimber Lanning. I'm the founder and CEO at Local First Arizona. I think that at the crux of the problem we're trying to solve is that we live in a society that generally measures success by growth and profitability. And we're really encouraging municipalities, whether they be cities, towns, counties, states, to reevaluate the way they're measuring success. And so, in order to build a more inclusive economy, one in which everyone has an opportunity to participate, we need to look at barriers. And so, in our particular state, one of our significant barriers is access to capital. We are under-resourced in the financial system, and it's taking care of upper middle class and wealthier people just fine. But for small business and certainly under-resourced members in our community, there's not a lot of flexibility in finance, and that limits people's ability to grow their small businesses. We believe that entrepreneurship and small business development is our strongest weapon to battle the racial wealth gap. The wealth gap generally, but very specifically the racial wealth gap. And so we do a lot of work with immigrant and refugee entrepreneurs, as well as third and fourth generation families that have been living in our community in poverty for a very long time. So we are attacking that, as Sean mentioned, from a lot of different angles, but that really gives you an idea of the core of our work. We are driving resources into under-resourced areas and investing in entrepreneurship in multiple ways. So just a glimpse of us, we're about a $6.5 million organization. We have offices in 3 different parts of the state and about 42 staff working on a variety of programs related to these issues that I talked about. So I'll leave it there.
Perfect. John, you want to go next and maybe just be the spokesperson for you got a couple people with you here, but maybe you could be the spokesperson.
Okay. Thanks, Sean. Hi, everyone. Hi, Kimber. Nice to see you again. So I'm here with my colleagues. Robert Craig is in Norman, Oklahoma. He's the staff attorney and associate director of Abolish Private Prisons. And Ali Hakala is just finished her first year of law school at Arizona State and is working with us as a summer intern on research and data analysis. So Abolish Private Prisons is the name of our Phoenix-based nonprofit public interest law firm. We're a 501c3 tax exempt. And you're pretty much looking at the staff. So I was a partner at a Phoenix law firm and resigned to do this work. And Robbie has been working with us for about 4 years from Oklahoma. Abolish Private Prisons was the name we picked in order that there be no ambiguity as to what we're about. We chose the verb abolish in order to hearken back to the pre-Civil War abolition movement relating to American slavery. Private prisons are prisons where private for-profit corporations operate the prisons and have 24/7 control over prisoners' lives. And just like hotels, they get paid when their cells are occupied and the model fails if they're not occupied. So unlike many other organizations that are opposed to prison privatization, we have chosen to go to the courthouse and challenge the very constitutionality of the concept. We think there are some things that are only the government's responsibility, and taking away a person's liberty is one of them. And that once you inject a profit motive in incarcerating people and keeping their lives entangled in the system, all kinds of things can go wrong. So that's the kind of work we do. We also do policy advocacy. We have a small volunteer board of directors, and we work with people who are incarcerated in any of the 12 private for-profit prisons that exist in Arizona, and are looking to work with people in private prisons elsewhere around the country. About half of the states and 4 federal agencies and local governments contract with private for-profit prisons, especially with immigrant detainees. About 80% of our immigrant detainees nationwide are in these facilities. And thanks a lot for the opportunity to meet you all.
Awesome. The two people that weren't able to attend was Kyla Raby was the human trafficking expert. She's in Australia. She just had a baby last week. And so it's like 5 a.m. her time, and she wasn't able to make this call. Julia Fossi in Barcelona, Spain, on the hunger and homelessness front, also, it sounds like was not able to make it tonight. But right here, we have 3 experts on various problems. The vision of this problem, we were talking a little bit before we started the recording here with you guys, just about the vision of the project. And, you know, everyone in the room, I think it would be helpful. This is kind of like a bridge building effort here. We've got experts on, you know, subject matter experts on problems, and then people who basically feel like they want to give back and who have a different skill set, a very unique mix of skills here. And so I think like the best thing we can do is figure out how we can move the needle the most for each one of these issues. Like what can be built with the skills that we have that would have the most impact towards helping on each one of these issues. And so I think maybe towards that front, maybe we just do a quick round of intros with the people in the room, just like your name, like your profession, and you know, like your interest in this. So maybe just real quick go around so they can meet around.
Yes, I go first. My name is Asia. I'm from Spain. I study criminology and international cooperation. So my focus is more in victimology than criminology. And that's why I'm here, to see if my skills and my abilities can do something or help somehow.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm Laura from Norway. I study and work with anthropology. Hi. And yeah, I just want to see how I can contribute with that.
Cool.
Hello, I'm Annabella, and I was born here in Portugal. I lived in Canada for several years and elsewhere. My professional life has been divided between being a journalist and a content producer, and also a researcher in neuroscience and human behavior. And I'm here to help with my skills wherever I can and any ability that I can come up with.
Hey, I'm Lucia. My day job is a product designer for digital products, so user experience design, interface design. I guess I have a very international, I guess, like trajectory. I am Chinese by origin, and I've been living in Portugal for about 4 years now. Yeah, that's about me.
Cool. Yeah, we have a bunch of product designers here. Yeah. So my name is Mag. I'm a digital nomad mostly, and I work as a product designer in a crypto company, and like I'm in crypto myself, so I'm trying to understand how we can bring more like Web3 approach to normal companies, and yeah, I will convey to next designer.
Hi everyone, I'm Petia. I'm also a product designer. I work mainly in user experience design, user interface design, testing as well. I have background in photography, also advertising, and art direction, but I do mostly research, user testing, and digital products. Nice to meet you all.
Hi, I am Hugo. I'm Portuguese, born and raised. I started out as an IT engineer, and halfway I did an MBA, and now I focus on digital marketing, business development on IT companies. So I like the startup world. In this case, I like the causes that we are focusing in here. I think I might contribute more to the wealth inequality because regarding the new crypto world that is coming up, I think it has some possibilities. And I also did some projects with my friends trying to advise them how to invest and how to have their savings and grow out of just in Portugal, it's very difficult to make a living just out of work. And yeah, I'm passionate about the causes here and seeing how can my IT and business side skill set can help.
So I think probably the best thing and because Kimber has to go the soonest, I think maybe we'll kind of open it up to Q&A for the people that heard her episode and want to focus on that issue. What questions do you have for her? Like the goal here, I think, is really to niche down and start to divide up in teams, figure out if we're going to be like 1, 2, 3 teams, however this works, and then figure out what we're going to build to attack that issue. So anyone have questions for Kimber while we got her? And just to review, like the solutions on that one, I think we talked about, I can pull it up. I know it's basically like viral campaign for buying local, like very much about like, when you spend with big box stores and like Amazon, the money bleeds out of the local economy. And like, they've done a lot of work to figure out this. This was kind of the spearhead of their initiative, is to figure out like keeping money local actually really, like those dollars regenerate and make a lot more for the local people versus when you spend it on that big stuff, it goes away.
I would like to ask Kimberly if how did they manage to convince people to buy local? Because I imagine, I think this was done. I listened to the episode. I think this was done in Arizona. I imagine there's a lot of people with different interests. So how did you manage to bring all this diverse population into starting or continuing to buy local?
Well, I think it's a combination of positive affirmations and also really speaking the truth about what happens if we don't. So, you've already got this, Amazon is showing no signs of slowing down. Massive company that has created wealth like really the world has never seen before. And they're eliminating jobs in our communities. They temporarily look like they're creating jobs, but what we don't often hear about is how many jobs are eliminated by those jobs. So for every 10 jobs they create, 15 local jobs are eliminated. So the total number of jobs are actually diminished. But it takes a bit to get the public to understand those types of concepts. And so, I think the message is different. Some people are motivated because they understand the economics of it. Some people are motivated by reasons as obtuse as they don't trust the internet and they don't want to shop online. Some people are very low income people. It would never occur to them to buy online. They buy from their neighbors in their communities. And so how can we then make sure that those businesses have the resources they need to best serve their community? So there's a variety of people, we call them arriving. They're arriving to us from different perspectives and different backgrounds. And we're building sort of a network of people who normally wouldn't come into contact with each other, right? They have very vastly different perspectives. So I think it's a lot of different things. I do think that having like the way the human brain works is it used to be Walmart and now it is Amazon, right? It used to be, I won't shop at Walmart and now it's I won't shop on Amazon. There's books about how to avoid Amazon and why you should. So I think, there's no one shot answer there. And it's a very complex situation. I think that all of humanity, that we find ourselves in this situation where we basically have a straw stuck in our economy that is just depleting wealth broadly and generating wealth in a very small sector.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I will also say that the more we have people fall from the middle class into the lower class, the more people will be looking for answers why. And the challenge that I think we will have is getting people to understand that we're in the driver's seat, that we control the economy. We're so focused on the decisions the president in the United States makes, and our president, or whoever's in the White House, barely influences the economy. It is the choices we make as consumers. We are a consumer-driven economy. And so getting people to understand that they want to blame someone else, and the media is right there to help them do that. So we need to get them to understand that if we just simply change the way we approach things, we could have entirely different outcomes.
Yeah, and I think, Kimber, my big takeaway from our interview, because I'm the guy, the guilty Amazon person, you know, I buy stuff on there because it's cheap and fast and whatnot. But like my main takeaway was what you talked about with the 10% shift and just being conscious. Now, every time that I go and I'm tempted to just go buy a pair of socks on Amazon, it's just like, do I really need to buy that, or could I like go down the street and just pick that up? And it's all it is. It's literally just being top of mind and shaping consumer behavior one person at a time, just through these types of awareness. You know, just that interview we had, you know, had that effect on me. So,
you know, I thought of another reason people come to us to answer that last question. Every study shows that people who buy their food at a farmer's market, for example, are 6 times more likely to have a conversation with someone at the market than they would be at a grocery store. And of course, if they were buying food online and having it delivered, they would have no conversation, right? So it's the human element of knowing who you're doing business with. It's more valuable to some than others, but a lot of people really want to know. They want to be in relationship with people they do business with.
Yeah, building the trust. Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think in terms of solutions on this front, the things that we talked about that might be able to help this effort were, you know, if we can come up with some kind of creative, almost like you guys remember the ALS challenge, like the ice bucket thing, where like it just went viral, like they did some kind of wacky thing, and there was nothing related to ALS with that particular thing. But the fact that it went viral, it spread such awareness of ALS, and it had something like $100 million impact or something. So I know we were talking about like if we can brainstorm some kind of clever thing around promoting local that had the same capacity to go viral, that would be an interesting thing. We also talked about this idea of maybe something that like a browser extension or something that for the people who use finance trackers, like mint.com is what I use, but anything that would surface and allow you to like see which of your transactions were local versus remote, it just might make it more obvious and again, help shape consumer behavior and that type of thing. So those were just some ideas, and obviously we can brainstorm whatever we want. But any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Are you, like, who are the people you're focusing on? Like, who is your target demographic? Are you focusing on people who are, you know, interested in shopping local and they need help and like tools to do it? Or are you focusing on Amazon, like people who shop at Amazon, they do it mainly for the convenience, right? Like you order something and you get it in 2 days. Are you trying to pull people like that away from it? And like, that's kind of like where you, like, who are you focusing on in terms of demographics?
Sure. So we have never found success in focusing on an anti campaign, right? We get much more traffic or much more receptivity if we're talking about the positive side. So we don't spend too much time talking about Amazon. Rather, we show people having exceptional experiences at locally owned businesses, and we reward them for choosing locally owned businesses. Part of our challenge, though, I will say is, you know, you ask who are we focused on? So we have a membership of locally owned business owners, and for them, we are focused on how to make them more competitive and how to make them more successful. For consumers, we're focused on how we can make going local fun and easy. For policymakers, we are focused on the simple fact that the economy doesn't work. Everyone goes broke. If everybody's on the couch ordering from Amazon, that will impact stores, that will impact the real estate market, that will impact the overall economy, and you will start to see blight and imploding, and the next generation won't be able to find jobs. It is bleak, right? We're not going to get anywhere by telling that story, even though it is the reality. So what we do is we talk to them about how locally owned businesses create the character and flavor of any place and makes driving tourism become stronger. The multiplier effect that Sean mentioned, local businesses are going to hire local graphic designers, website developers, payroll service providers, accountants. Amazon doesn't support any of those companies here in Arizona. They're all centralized in one place. So those are the 3 examples of different target audiences that we are trying to reach all through one ridiculously jam-packed social media channel.
Cool. Any other questions for Kimber? Cool. All right. Well, Kimber, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely. It's really a pleasure meeting you, and thank you for your interest in the work that we're doing. And if I can answer any follow-up questions, just let me know.
Okay. Awesome. We'll do.
All right. Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Sorry.
All right. Well, so John, I think your team, because you haven't actually done an episode and we'll probably go the longest with you, I figure maybe we'll go Rick next, and then Rick can drop off, and then we can spend the remainder of the evening with you guys, if that works for everyone. Cool. Okay, so what questions? So Rick was the Cancer Industrial Complex. Anyone have questions for Rick? Yeah. Okay.
This interests me a lot.
Yeah. Okay.
Rick, so I had a little trouble hearing you because I'm like in the last end of the table. But as I understand, so you were connecting nutrition with the cancers, right? Did I get it right?
Partially. That's not the only thing that one might implement as a therapy, if you will. But that is certainly a core component among others. And on the flip side, conversely, poor nutrition also is not going to be helpful to your immune system and your health in general. Yes, that is one of several things which are critically important.
Okay. So the question I had for you was, did you find any differences between the different types of cancers?
Not generally. Cancer, there are many similarities between all cancers, but there are also differences. People define cancer geographically. They say, you've got breast cancer or prostate cancer, a part of your body, but there are mutations that are floating throughout your lymph system and your blood vessels, but not really specifically. And the book and the people I talked to concern all different types of cancer. And I didn't want to just isolate it to one or two, because cancer actually is tied as the biggest killer in this country. It's tied with cardiovascular disease in terms of people dying. And it's not slowing down, despite, I don't know what they are showing in Portugal or Spain, but it's prevalent, and as an absolute number, it's continuing to grow. But in addition to nutrition being extremely important, you all heard the term, you are what you eat. And it really is so true. If you make transformational changes, you'll watch your biochemistry change, your health will change. I'm not talking moderation, but I'm talking about very significant change. But in addition to nutrition, stress, for example, stress is a killer. I don't care what your issues are, but stress weakens the immune system, and we need a strong immune system to fight disease. Certain types of evidence-based supplements can be quite valuable. There is junk out there, but there are evidence-based supplements which are backed by thousands and thousands of what's called peer-reviewed studies supporting the notion that they can be eminently powerful and helpful. And exercise is also another component of disease in general. But going back again, nutrition is something we do every day. We all eat or drink something virtually every day. And what you eat is profoundly important.
Just to give you a little bit of information about Portugal. So I have a cousin, she's an oncologist, so I know a little bit. In Portugal now, there's a huge problem with intestinal cancer, so colon cancer, and especially with people between 30 and 40 years of age. And they're trying to figure out why this has been happening for the last 2 years now. There's been a surge in this type of cancer in Portugal, and they're trying to figure out what it is. And I guess the conclusions are not definitive yet, but it points to nutrition and lifestyle and stress, like you were saying. So I guess it's a global problem. It's not just in the States or here in Europe. I think it's a global issue, especially with stress, nutrition, and lifestyle.
Yeah, and without a doubt. And regarding colon cancer, eating a specific type of animal protein, and that means red meat, beef, is not a good thing and has been found statistically to contribute significantly to colon cancer. An issue you said was really important. You said a lot of people between 30 and 40. In the medical world, colonoscopies generally in the United States are not done until about the age of 50, although they're bringing the age down because, as you said, to support what you said, more and more young people are getting colon cancer, but they're not tested. And colon cancer is something that can be prevented if people get colonoscopies. But what you eat, again, going through your digestive tract is very important. And a lot of red meat is not a good thing and is found to be a real negative, a real contributor to colon cancer.
Yeah. But let me ask you this. In the States, a colonoscopy, you have to pay for it, right? So there's no, because you pay for every treatment or every medical exam, you pay for it. There's no
unless you have insurance. If you have insurance, insurance should pay for most colonoscopies.
Okay.
Medical insurance.
Yeah, it's just because, as you said, here in Portugal, they are trying to change also the age of the colonoscopy to 40. I just did a colonoscopy in March because I'm over 50, and here we don't pay for it. Just to give you another perspective. So there's the government and the health minister, they do campaigns because it's the highest cause of death here in Portugal. So they make it free for people over 50.
Right. Yeah. If you have health insurance here, you can get it paid for. But there are a lot of people who do not have health insurance, and it's terrible that they can't get things paid for. And a lot of cancer therapies in this country are what's called reimbursable. In other words, paid by insurance. But if you don't have health insurance, then it's a crime. It's terrible. You cannot get certain therapies and medical procedures done. And if you lean towards the integrative approach or more of a complementary or alternative approach, when I say the word alternative, it's always preceded by the word evidence-based, because there's stuff which is, I'll just say, is garbage, but there's a lot of profoundly important things that are alternative in nature. And those things are not reimbursable or paid by insurance. So it's terrible. You have to pay out of pocket for some therapies that can be life-saving.
Thank you.
Sure.
Questions for Rick? I think, like, on a solutions brainstorming front, with this one, we were thinking, obviously promoting like what we're up against, because there's like this trifecta, they call it the standard of care, which is radiation, chemotherapy, and surgery. And that is widely promoted as like, this is your only option. You get cancer, you do one of these three things. Mm-hmm. And so, Rick's book, Hope Never Dies, was all about promoting these integrative alternative cares. Nobody makes money on vegetables, so that's why like the FDA, no one's getting paid to promote that. So anything we can do, Rick, go ahead.
Yeah, and regarding that, I am not anti-standard of care, but I am pro doing standard of care in a certain way. It would, for example, chemotherapy is not a very pleasant therapy, but there are ways to do chemotherapy that mitigates, that lessens toxicity, that lessens the harsh side effects, which are not accepted by standard of care. Although there are progressive and integrative oncologists who are aware of these things that utilize those approaches. There are things that can be done regarding radiation to mitigate the effects of radiation. Everyone thinks radiation doesn't have harmful effects. Not true, but it can have significant effects. But I'm for intelligent standard of care, and I'm for definitely bringing to the table other therapies that enhance outcomes and that save lives. And this is not voodoo. This is not nonsense. I know hundreds and hundreds of people, and I've interviewed dozens and dozens of doctors who are alive, despite the fact major cancer centers said, I'm sorry, go home, nothing more we can do, live your life. But these people made changes. They made changes. So you have to bring other things to the table. And so pursuant to standard of care, there's something called stage 4. Stage 4 is the last stage. It's stage 1, 2, 3, and 4 when you get diagnosed. And there's no stage 5. But when you have stage 4, people think, well, oh, that's it. That's it pursuant to standard of care approaches, not other integrative or complementary approaches, which are not recognized frequently. I'll give you one more example, one more thought. There's something called, for example, curcumin. Curcumin is the biologically active agent in something called turmeric or turmeric. And turmeric is a spice. You might find it in your spice cabinet. And if you looked on a website called PubMed.gov, which is the National Institute of Health online library, there's approximately 30 million studies of all kinds of medical issues there. If you put the word in there, curcumin cancer, and curcumin is just a spice, essentially, you'll come up with literally over 4,000 studies. Not 4 studies, 4,000 studies. There weren't 4,000 different studies because people didn't think there was something there. So my point is, there is a ton of evidence that's not implemented or used because conventional medicine is about pharmaceutical medicine primarily. If something's not approved by the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, it's not recognized. And you're not going to get curcumin, just as one of hundreds of examples, approved because you can't get a patent on it, a 20-year patent to protect the $1 billion it took to do the studies. So anybody on this Zoom call can start a company and sell curcumin. But if curcumin was a drug, you couldn't because you'd be protected for 20 years. And no one's going to get a return on investment and do a study that costs $1 billion to go through what's called the phase 3 FDA process without a return on investment. So it's sad, but there are many things you can bring to the table.
I have a question. I actually have two. Again, it's sort of similar to what I asked. I forget her name. Kimberly. Who are you trying to help? Like, who are you helping? Specific patients, specific type of patients, specific people at a specific point of their journey, like their healing journey? Like, who are you focusing on? And then my second question is, what are you guys currently doing? Like, how are you currently helping them? Are you like connecting them with information, or are you connecting them with other types of healers? Just wondering what the current sort of approach is.
Yeah, I'll meet with people from time to time that'll come to in my real life, I actually do something. I'm in what's called the merger and acquisition business. I sell companies, and I used to practice law 100 years ago, maybe not 100, but many years ago. But in the cancer world is a passion of mine. I meet with people who are aware that I've done some cancer coaching and cancer consulting right here in my office, who maybe themselves are dealing with a cancer situation, whether it's stage 1, 2, 3, or 4, different types of cancer. I'll sit down with somebody for a couple of hours. I'll put something in writing, which is maybe 2 or 3, 4 pages, about approaches and things they should consider. I will refer people and say, I think you should call this person for a consult regarding this person is the preeminent person in the United States regarding nutritional oncology. This person in terms of supplemental oncology, in other words, certain herbs, botanicals, and vitamins. This person is the patriarch of integrative oncology in Chicago. You can do a consult or go visit Chicago. So I will refer people to places that I think they can get great benefit. This person does chemo, but he's the one of only 2 people in this country that does a fantastic chemo sensitivity test to ascertain before they give you the chemo based on, a study of 400,000 people, which is highly personalized to your actual tissue sample, an actual sample. They'll test against 12 different chemos. But so I refer people to different people who I think are on the cutting edge. And I will also give people a lot of advice, and I will let them know when they're really in a depressed state that they are not a statistic. Oncologists love to say, people who have your type of cancer at your stage, which has spread to the liver and the brain and wherever, have 3 to 6 months to live. Well, I can tell you about lots of people who were told the same thing who are here 20 years later. So trying to focus. Getting the word out is tough, and getting people to believe these things are tough. Medical doctors, moving major institutions is glacially slow. Medical doctors are taught dogmatically, this is what you do. And they know nothing of what I'm talking about. They don't take 27% of the medical schools in this country, based on the National Academy of Science, actually teach a nutritional class. That means about 75% don't. And so they have no knowledge or background. And then they will just dismiss things and say, oh, it's nonsense. Well, it's not nonsense. There's tremendous evidence. But anyway, yeah, go ahead.
So in the interest of
Time, sure.
moving it along, okay, so we don't necessarily have to have the brainstorm solution that we're going to work on with this particular problem tonight, but you get the gist now of kind of what the problem space is, and so we can kind of talk offline afterwards about that. But if there's no other questions for Rick, then we'll move on. Awesome. Rick, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it, man.
Good luck. Keep moving forward. Bye.
Cheers. Cool. All right. And now John. So John has not actually been on the podcast yet. He will be the next guest, but we've saved the best for last here, John, and I'll let you kind of have more time since you haven't actually had a podcast. Can you, so everyone kind of understands the basic problem here, privatized prisons, like incentivized to incarcerate our population. It's insane that we even have this practice. What questions do you have for John on this topic?
I have one question. Because for me, it's something like still need to get in my brain, the privatized prisons. So does the government have any influence in them? Is there like a law or requirement that these privatized prison they have to obey, or it's totally like up to them? Is there like a law that they involve somehow, or no? Like, where is the limit?
And Sean, if you don't mind, I'd love to invite Robbie to participate in some of this conversation.
Absolutely.
And Allie has just joined us. I don't know whether she'd want to, but the way it generally happens is this: we had overcrowded public prisons, some of the facilities dilapidated, and so some enterprising business interests offered to relieve the overcrowding, and the message being whatever the government does, the private sector can do it better and can do it more cheaply. And so much like our healthcare system, so we have what our the closest thing we have to national health insurance is our Medicare and Medicaid programs. That includes government funding that goes mostly to private doctors and hospitals which provide the service. In the same way, the government provides the funding to the cities, towns, states, or even the federal government agency to then contract with private corporations that perhaps build or own their own prisons that are built for the purpose of contracting with government. And then they negotiate the terms, and the government, once it receives prisoners through the court system, then assigns its prisoners to either public or private facilities. Most prisoners, after they've been convicted of a crime, go to public prisons. In our immigration setting, most people go to the private facilities. And so these corporate prisons then act like any other corporation. How do we sustain our business? How do we grow our business? And our business is incarcerating people. And if our business product, prisons, are threatened, how do we protect ourselves? Well, by offering more for-profit services, for-profit probation, parole, community supervision, and going global, offering the product in other countries as well. So private prisons, for example, have spread through the United Kingdom as one example. I hope that answered your question.
Just to add on real quick, and short answer to the question, the requirements for the private prisons vary drastically because incarceration is largely run by the states. The states have different requirements. Some of them are required to do more than others. There's generally at least a statutory requirement that private prisons provide some level of care and some level of programs, and some states have higher requirements than others, but there at least is in most places some baseline requirements that they provide some services. And it's a question of whether those are sufficient, whether they're similar to public prisons, and even if both of those things are true, whether the private prisons are actually doing the things that they're supposed to be by statute. So short answer is yes, sort of. It varies state to state, and maybe they follow them, maybe they don't.
I would say one of the things, an exercise that we do with students or various audiences, church groups, people in prisons and the like, is this. We ask the people, such as yourselves sitting around the table, to assume that you are shareholders in a for-profit prison corporation, and this is your annual meeting. You're going to come up with a 5-year strategic plan to sustain and grow business. Well, you're in the business of incarcerating people. What are your strategies? And it's going to be like any other business. You're going to think of things that serve what you do. How do we get more people in prison? How do we keep them there longer? How do we make it more likely that they come back? How do we make sure that people are elected to office that support our industry and send lobbyists to legislatures to create laws that enhance the need for our services? And if you're a hotel or a resort industry, you're looking for ways to get more government resources directed your way. All of the funding for these prison corporations is government funding. Without government customers, there is no need for this service. So you're affecting public policy, criminal justice in a very broad way at state and local levels.
Yeah, and the one thing that in digging into this that really got me is that, like you said, because they are in the business of prisons, like cutting their expenses, like, ditching non-essential programs and doing the absolute bare minimum obviously helps their bottom line. But it also then it's a double whammy because it increases the recidivism. It brings people, makes them more likely to then come out not corrected and then get back into prison. And so it just basically makes them a repeat customer and helps them on both sides of it. And so if you just think how perverse incentives are at work here, it's really a shame. And John, maybe you can talk about your approach. I know you're going after the constitutionality of it. Can you talk about the litigation strategy that you guys are pursuing?
Yeah, so it is certainly our main strategy and job one is, so we work with people who are in private prisons. We work with a national organization, the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, a civil rights organization. And so what we do is we file a lawsuit in a courthouse and we challenge the local laws or the state laws that authorize or mandate contracting with prison corporations. And secondly, we challenge the contracts that result from those state laws. And we say that these things violate the United States Constitution. If we take on another case, we may sue just an individual state or a city under a more local law or a state constitution, making similar kinds of arguments. So that's how we go about it. It's basically a civil rights form of advocacy, and then it's up to the judges to decide whether we've proven facts and argued the law in a way that persuades the court to rule in our favor. What we seek, ultimately, whether it's now or years in the future, is a ruling from the United States Supreme Court that this practice must be banned throughout the land. That happened in Israel, where the Israeli Supreme Court found prison privatization to be a violation of Israel's basic law, a human rights violation. And that's basically our strategy.
Yeah. So I think like we haven't done the interview yet, so haven't had too much of a chance to like drill into potential solutions and things that we could build. But they're pursuing basically a litigation strategy. My thinking here is that, you know, ultimately the answer is to make it economically non-viable for these companies. If like John, what are the names of those companies again? The kind of faceless big multinational ones. I know there's only a handful of them.
There's three major players in the United States, two of which are traded on the New York Stock Exchange. To give you an example of how this system operates, if one presidential administration says we're no longer going to use private prisons, the value of the corporate stock goes down because of projections of fewer people in their facilities. Another president comes in and says we're going to use private prisons a lot more. The stock goes up, and the value of the stock is based on projections of people in prison. So in our view, people are now being used as commodities and exploited. So
CoreCivic and Geo Group are those two.
Management and Training Corporation is the third one. It's privately held. So a couple of strategies that have been tried on small scale is to encourage divestment. So years ago, there was a big public campaign to get Americans to divest from South Africa during the time of apartheid. There are students at universities who've asked that their trustees divest their retirement pension plans from these private prisons. So that's an example. Who is invested in them? How do we out them and encourage divestment? A second one has been to focus on the big banks to get them to agree not to be the bankers, lenders to these prison corporations. That has had some very limited success. A lot of it is following the money. Who's taking their money? You know, in order to get elected, that doesn't seem to influence people.
I think once people understand like like you can explain it to a third grader and then they'll make sense like how this is so perverse and like how the incentives are all wrong and like who wants to live in a society where you know it's profitable to enslave your population. That's just insane. So I think if you like doing an awareness campaign to get people to understand the basics of it and where they nod their head and say, yeah, we agree, this is totally wrong, then here's 3 things you can do. Like ask your pension fund who they're invested in. If they're invested in this company, then insist that they change. You know, stuff like that. Any kind of pressure that we can exert, you know, getting consumers to vote with their wallets, getting like a.
So, Sean, if I can pick up on Kimber's point.
Yeah.
She said that she found that the anti-campaigns didn't work. What you really needed was the affirmations, the positive messaging. Mm-hmm. So in our view, it would be more about what are some really good reasons to support, for example, what we're doing, others are doing, to create serious change in ending our system of mass incarceration in this country. And what are all the benefits of that? The thing we need the most is resources, money, to do the kind of work that we're doing. But to get grassroots support at a really big level, I think that's the kind of educational campaign we might need. How do we get the positives out there?
Question, maybe I'm not understanding, like, so the government is contracting these companies, right?
Not all governments, but yes.
So why are they doing that?
So a lot of it has to do with following the money. So
is the government making money off of it as well?
Well, the governments also benefit from some of the revenue that's generated from prison labor, for example. So that's another big aspect of this. There is huge money, profits created through the forced captive labor of prisoners who are paid pennies to do work for all kinds of private and governmental interests. It's another place where the money shows up.
Yeah, but the more direct answer, I think, is that the legislators are getting money directly from the private corporations through lobbying and campaign contributions. So you find that, especially in states where there's a lot of private prisons, Texas and Florida, for example, they are huge donors to political campaigns and to lobbying efforts. So there's this, it's a really crazy cycle of money where you get money that goes from the politician to the, the lobbyist, or from the corporation to the government actor, and then the government actor votes to spend tax dollars that goes back to the private prison corporation that they can then collect more campaign contributions from. So it's one of those things where it's a very small group of people who are making money from it, and included in that circle is the politicians who are themselves making money off of it. The pitch that the private prisons will make is that we can save you money, and that is it's a seductive pitch to a lawmaker, and they can sort of finagle the numbers to make it look like it doesn't cost as much, and they are clever about how they do that, and it takes some sort of academic research to untangle those things to figure out that the only reason that they can even reasonably make that argument is they're taking people in prison that cost less. So they take younger and healthier people, and so the overall average number might be less or something like that. But basically every sophisticated study that's come out says that they don't save any money, or that they cost a little bit more, but they can pitch that to legislators and then give them the cover of saying it saves money. And then the other part of it is that it's very hard to convince voters to care about people in prison. It's like a very low on the totem pole of things that they're voting for. So it operates in the back room. The politicians are making money directly. And then, as John mentioned, the government itself can benefit through all of these private prison things. We just did a podcast with Bianca Tylek, and she explained very well the kind of revenue sharing that can go on in these places, where like the sheriff's office itself can make money off of labor and then selling products that they make. So it's a complex thing, and there's lots of actors that are making money, but the most direct one, I think, is just the campaign contributions and lobbyist money.
Yeah, because I was thinking maybe the stock itself is not the main incentive, because it may not be that known, and they might profit maybe from shareholders and the ones connected close to the company, not in the public. Are they all public? Are the three companies public?
Geo Group and Core Civic are. Yeah, management and training is not. But Geo Group and Core Civic make up, even out of those three, they make up like I think 80% of those three or something like that. Management and Training Corporation is a significantly smaller actor compared to the two big ones.
Yeah, I think the revenue share might be the thing that we might have some leverage on, because the stock, I don't see the stock as being the main incentive. Do they have like good performance?
Yeah, it's like most of these giant corporations, it's complicated. They've shifted for a while into being REITs, which I don't know if that's like a common international. It's like a real estate investment trust. Yeah. And by having that real estate sector, they own the land that the private prisons are on. And so,
right, dividends.
Exactly. And so they get lots of tax benefits from being a REIT. And because of things have changed, at least one of the two major ones has transitioned away from making money off their REIT status. But I only highlight that in particular because they do a lot of things, and what is profitable at any one point or for any one annual report that they're putting out there, it can shift pretty rapidly. But they make like a 20% revenue margin per prisoner per day. And that stuff you can find in their investor reports.
Yeah, it might be something like a casino kind of incentive, right?
Totally.
So to come back to your question, though, at the beginning, if I could, some governments in the United States contract with private prisons, such as the states Robbie and I are in, Arizona and Oklahoma. Some states forbid that industry, such as New York or Illinois or Washington. And then you have a leader. So, for example, President Biden has issued an executive order to do away with private prisons at the federal level. But that's not the same as creating a law by the legislative branch. And the next administration can have a different point of view on the topic. So it's not one thing. There are some places that think it's a terrible idea and don't use them.
Yeah. I'm just curious, what are the revenue streams, like the typical ways of making money out of this labor? I just wonder if there's like tackling like the business model, like other different ways that they can make this revenue ethical, or like change this business model around for the better.
I was having some difficulty hearing the first part of your question.
The various revenue models, and if there's any like weaknesses in the revenue models, I think, and whether there's ethical attacks on the revenue models, right?
Yeah, there are opportunities for this revenue model to be less, like, I guess, damaging or exploratory on the labor.
Yeah. It's hard, there's some, they pay people who are in prison either nothing in some places or to the, like $1 a day for their labor. So there is some movement to make even that payment more ethical. It's very hard, even in progressive states, to pass laws to require prisoners be paid a minimum wage, for example. They're specifically exempted from many of the minimum wage laws. So it's hard to think in terms of an ethical shift in how prison labor operates when even like the low American minimum wage standards can't be met. I mean, it's really to the extent where the 13th Amendment, which is widely understood as banning slavery in the United States, except there's a clause in there that says except for punishment as a crime. So what happens is the law has treated forced labor or even this coercive labor where you get paid virtually nothing as being constitutional. And it's sort of like this accepted thing in the American understanding that you can just force prisoners to work for virtually nothing. And a lot of people think that they should just be happy that they're getting anything at all. So it really shifting that ethical conversation is an uphill battle, but it's definitely something that some people are susceptible to, I think.
The other revenue model, I'm sorry if I could just complete this. The other revenue model is how the private prison gets paid by the government. So the way it's typically done is there's what's called a per diem. They get paid a set amount of money for every man day that a person is in their prison. And then they get occupancy guarantees of 90% or more. So the government has incentives to keep the private prisons full. Otherwise, they're going to pay for empty prison cells and have to explain that to taxpayers. There is often discussions by advocates of the private prison system. Yeah, well, we can move to a model where the reimbursement rates are based on outcomes. How successfully do people re-enter society? Much like some of the things that are happening in our healthcare system. Well, that's a nice discussion and it's fictional. That system does not exist. And whether they move there or not, there's always going to be a matter of how much attention is the government really paying to its vendors. But that's the other part of it. There's the way that their corporations are funded and the incentive, prepayment, a set amount for each day. The way you increase your profits is, as you mentioned earlier, you cut your facility costs. Typically, that means staffing.
I was just going to throw in one other revenue stream as long as we're on the topic. So we talked about extracting free labor out of people, about getting the government payments. There's also, I believe it was in a podcast you did, John, where you're talking about like the sheriff actually controls the vending machine, and like a roll of toilet paper is $2.50, and like a phone call, there's an app they have to use to make all their phone calls, and it's like they charge them these wild, insane rates just to talk to their family. Yeah, the inmates have to pay for that. So it's just extracting more revenue out of the people that are there.
So I understand, this is a really foreign thing to me. How, like, I'm going to say the word choose, but it's not not the appropriate word. But how do they choose the inmates that go to these prisons comparing to the government prisons? How does this work? So, what are the requirements for the inmates to go to this kind of prison?
How do they,
And the
go ahead, Rob.
It's a combination of two things. You have on the front end, before the private corporation agrees to, basically the government puts out a request for proposal and says, we need a new private prison. And then one or two or both or some combination of the corporations presents a proposal and says, we'll build this many beds for this cost, and we will take this subset of prisoners. So it might be like all the states have different classification systems, right? And the classification is made up of a bunch of factors, like what crime what crimes were you convicted of? How likely are you to be a safety risk once you're inside of a prison? What are your health needs? All of these kinds of factors, right? And you get assigned a score, 72. And so the private prison contractors, when they submit that proposal, say, we will take in this prison that we're going to build, we'll take everybody that's, 50 to 70 or whatever, all the classification systems are different, but that's, so when they make the prison, they say, these are the kinds of facilities we're going to have. These are the kinds of prisoners we'll take. Once it's built and it's in operation, the actual decision about where any individual prisoner goes is, as far as I'm aware, always, but at least in the places we've looked, under the sole discretion of the government actor. So it's usually the person who heads the Bureau of Prisons that has responsibility for it. And of course, he's not making day-to-day decisions, whoever is inside of that government bureaucracy. But ultimately, the final decision where anybody gets placed is made by the government. And so they're weighing factors like, where do I have an open bed? As John was explaining, there's occupancy guarantees. So if any of these private prisons ever dips below 90%, they will immediately shift more people into that private prison so that they're not paying for empty cells. They also take into account things like, are there racial gangs in this prison or that prison, and try to make people safe or whatever. So that ultimate decision is made by a government actor. On the front side, the private company makes the decision about what kind of people they're willing to take based on the rates and stuff.
I think we haven't had dinner yet, so I think in the interest, we'll probably wrap it up here. In terms of just to kind of tie this off, how would you guys be best supported other than raising funds? Is there, given the people that we have in the room, is there any particular project you can imagine, like an awareness campaign or anything that we could do to support the work you guys are doing?
I think an awareness campaign is right at the top of the list. We would love to be able to really catch fire if we could with grassroots donations. You get 100,000 college students to donate $5 one time. We have a war chest to work with because we have to hire expert witnesses. We have all kinds of litigation costs and the like. So resources. The other thing would be connections to potential wealthy donors or foundations that want to do something about this. Robbie, other opportunities. Yeah. Robbie's done some written publications.
From our perspective, you're, like John said, you're looking at the entire staff of the organization, and especially when we have ongoing litigation, those deadlines come up quickly and it requires our full attention. So we struggle with our online presence, right? We are lucky to work with another nonprofit that redesigned our website and helped us with some branding issues, but we really struggle with engaging consistently and meaningfully through different digital spaces. It's to the extent where we really can't even afford one of those social media management apps, right? That could let us plan 2 months in advance. When we have time, I just do it as much as I can to fill in some time. So I think I see it as two different questions that are related, right? One is helping us organizationally specifically, and that is what John's talking about, funding awareness campaigns and stuff. The other thing is helping the private prison abolition movement more generally. And I think that's where some of the ideas that you were talking about, putting some grassroots pressure in different ways, putting some moral pressure on the people who are doing business with them, putting some publicity pressure when they make these deals in the first place. We've worked with a group of community advocates in, I think it was Georgia or Alabama. It was Alabama, who there was a private, the governor was trying to keep this agreement private. And they did a lot of work to expose the fact that they were going to build this, they called it a mega prison, a mega private prison. And just by shining a light on it, they were able to delay. And I think ultimately that thing is not going to happen. So there's this thing that happens. They're like cockroaches. They operate in darkness, and the more light that gets shined on them, it's harder for them to do well. So in terms of helping the abolition movement generally, all of those opportunities, there is a lot of opportunities for divestment, for public pressure, for moral campaigns, and that kind of stuff. So I think for APP, digital engagement in any way to build our team so that it's not just the two of us and then relying on nonprofit help, pro bono help from other people is helpful. And then when it comes to the movement, it is really about exposure and, moral campaigns, because people like you've said, you can explain it to a third grader. People get that it's wrong. It's just showing them what's happening and getting them to care. And if you can do that, you can really affect change, especially at the state level. One thing that's crazy is it is hard to get the federal government to do anything. State legislators are a lot more persuadable because the campaigns are smaller. It's more local. You can really make a change at the state level, and the states make up something like between 80 and 85% of all people that are in prison are in states. So there's a lot of potential change at the state level.
So a campaign manager.
Sorry, is it possible to through those campaigns get people to pressure local governments? Will that have a snowball effect?
Yeah, I think that kind of thing is sort of a promising territory. If you can get some local momentum to put pressure on state legislators about this single issue, I think if you can get people to care about this as an issue, it's not that big of a money issue for most places. So like you really can affect change by a small group, I think, at the state level.
All right, guys. Well, everyone, thank you all for your time and for joining us. And then John and Robbie, if you're up for it, I'd love to, once I've done my homework, we'll do a formal podcast episode and we'll drill into this even more and we'll put it up there.
That would be terrific. And it sounds like you've already shared our podcast. Thank you very much for doing that.
Yep, absolutely. All right, guys. Well, we'll let you go and we'll be in touch. We'll kind of brainstorm, circle the wagons, and we'll let you know what we come up with.
Thanks. Have a good evening.
Cheers, guys.
Nice to meet you all.